You are doing something massively wrong if you are letting your bank tell you how your operation is doing. We've been conditioned to believe that our banker is a trusted advisor inside of your operation. Guys, that is the furthest thing from the truth. I am not going to take business counsel from somebody that is not a business owner.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farm, the podcast. Today's topic and discussion is going to be me interviewing one of our main business coaches and actually our director of coaching inside of Legacy Farmer, a guy by the name of Lance Weaver. He's got over a decade of experience in ag banking, and I think it's pretty clear that inside today's episode, you are going to see his passion and why he is our director of coaching at Legacy Farmer. So let's get to it. Lance, let's get real about numbers, dude. So, and looking at this, you worked obviously in ag banking for over a decade. What were the red flags you could spot immediately in a producer's financials with hundreds, maybe even thousands of them that you've looked at over the years?
So it's going to sound really basic, Jace, but whenever I look at a producer's balance sheet, knowing what I know about agriculture and what I should expect as a standard view of what's coming in, and then also whenever I go out to these operations and the balance sheet doesn't match up, if the balance sheet's assets and liabilities don't make any sense, then I have questions about what is going on. Do these people have a handle of what's going on in their financials? I'm almost certain that they don't have a good cash flow, and if they do, they may not even know what a cash flow is.
Yeah.
So I think those are big red flags. That tells me a lot about whether they have a risk management plan, whether they have any kind of idea of what they want to be in the future, or if they're just guessing day by day.
So let's actually talk a little bit more basic just about the balance sheet here too. What are some specific red flags when you're looking at a customer's balance sheet that just exposes all these problems and really just this lack of knowledge, right? Because if they don't have structure and organization on the balance sheet, we know that they don't have a marketing plan or a crop plan or anything like that. So talk about those red flags specifically on a balance sheet.
If they're coming in this time of year and they don't have any investment in growing crops on their balance sheet, after they spent money and resources in the field to get the crop in the ground, I have a lot of concerns.
Yeah.
The other thing is crop and feed inventory hasn't been up to date. There may even be a checking account that doesn't exist, or that exists that's not on there. Equipment is a one-liner. It just says farm equipment and it's got $1.5 million. Land is home place, ... terms of value. Those are all things that people think are superficial, that really don't go into the planning of their operation. Those are things that are extremely important. If you can't be detailed with yourself and understand where your numbers are, how in the world are you going to expect anybody else to latch on and potentially invest in your operation?
Yeah. The presentation definitely matters there. And that was, a similar experience for me. So when it comes to, again, looking at these balance sheets, what's your typical response when you have a customer that's putting multiple businesses into one balance sheet together?
Do they actually know who's making money, who's not making money? And that goes back into the cash flow, because ultimately the cash flow and the balance sheet work together. There's a very systematic way in where they talk to each other. I really have been dialing in with people about equity. What I want to know is if they have a cattle operation, they have a crop operation, that the cattle and crop operation are actually growing equity every single year. Either that or we need to dive in surgically and start diagnosing that problem, identifying the areas where we can improve, heal those areas up, and move that operation forward. So those are definitely concerns when you start running them together. It makes everything muddy and hard to dissect.
Yeah, what's the first thing though that their banker's doing when they bring in a combined balance sheet that shows multiple businesses just on one balance sheet?
Well, from the banker's perspective, I'm probably, if I was in the banker's seat, calling and asking them, when can I make a farm visit? Because I feel like I'm going to have to take control of this operation in order to keep them in business. Because if I take that crap to the committee is going to freaking tear it apart.
Yep.
And so I always tell everybody, we're prepared for war here. I'm your number one advocate. Once you get past me, then we're getting into the shark pit, right? So if that's the case, then I need to know exactly and be confident of everything that you're putting on these documents so that I can defend you wholeheartedly when it comes to these other people that have to see these numbers.
Yeah, so let's talk about shark pit a little bit, right? So a lot of people, they think that their loan officer has their best interest at heart. They think that their loan officer is protecting them when they go into the shark pit, aka loan committee, with maybe some people from the bank board, some people local to the community and stuff like that. What's been your experience, right? Because I know how Lance operates, and I'd like you to talk about just the difference between like how you're going to prepare your customers for the shark pit to protect their operation versus how the average loan officer does it nowadays.
Okay, so let's back up and talk about the origins of these loan officers first. So a lot of these loan officers, they come into the banking systems. They don't have any practical experience. They didn't grow up in families that own businesses. They didn't grow up on a farm. They went into ag business because they thought that sounded good or that felt good. That's an area that they wanted to participate in because of the people, but they weren't the right people to be participating in these industries. So they did not have the personal investment to care enough and understand enough what it takes to run these operations. So you're taking somebody like that, you're throwing them out there. They're typically good with numbers, but they're also an 8 to 5 person at best. Really and truly, when we're talking about like 10 to 3, they have like politicians' hours. And, they're not going to take the time to go out there and ask those questions or even know what questions to ask. Take somebody with my background, for instance. Everybody in my family owned their own business. I grew up in rural America. Our family owned farmland. Everything that we did was based around the farming sector. I got into ag lending not because I was wanting to be a banker, but because it was really a place that my skill set, which I was particularly good with numbers, really could be used. But the problem is the banking environment itself didn't fit me very well. It felt a lot like politics. There was a lot of constraints. I felt like somebody was on my throat all the time whenever I wanted to be there to help my customers. In fact, I tell this story to a lot of people. I have an old boss who I have the utmost respect for. We have a lot of similarities in our view of agriculture. One day we're riding around in the truck and he's mentioned that he was a company man. And I said, oh my gosh, I finally figured out where we're different. I'm not. I'm a customer. Because if you ever make me make the choice between making the right choice for my customers or choosing the right choice for the bank, you're not going to like the result. So if that's going to be a problem, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Come to find out I was. And so that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Now talk about it from the other lens, though. Talk about how the average loan officer goes into the shark pit and really how they're not protecting their customers from their viewpoint.
So they don't really care. It's all a numbers game to them. At the end of the day, they have growth statistics. They have credit quality statistics that they have to hit. Profitability statistics. And as long as they stay within those, it really and truly the person that they're dealing with on the back of this loan really doesn't matter all that much to them. And guys, I know that there's a lot of good bankers out there. I don't want to say a lot. There's a handful of good bankers out there. And some of them are my friends. But the average banker is not somebody that's going to walk in and be willing to fight for you tooth and nail because they see the vision of agriculture. You need to be working with somebody that cares more about the vision of agriculture than they do the vision of the bank, and how they care about protecting you and protecting your family and ensuring that legacy and finding those right people really hard. And honestly, to tell you the truth, at Legacy Farmer, if they are that kind of person, we may hire them as a business coach. They're going to get that pool's going to get smaller over the time.
Yeah, the key term here that comes up for me is being in financial integrity, right? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of loan officers, when they're taking customers' numbers into loan committee, they will manipulate them and be not in financial integrity to make that customer look better, aka make themselves look better inside of the shark pit there. And the reality is customers don't even know this is happening, right? So they're setting up the customer for failure there ultimately long term as well. So any experiences with that?
Absolutely. There's always trying to inflate numbers in order to get themselves through committee. I knew of a producer or a loan producer at one of my previous institutions, let's put it that way, that was notorious for that. And what happened is he was able to kind of fudge his way around for 2 or 3 years. Come to find out, the rubber met the road, and we had an auditor come in, review those files, and come to find out after they peeled back the layers, it was a ginormous mess. And they ended up downgrading the situation, sending them in collections. That particular loan officer ended up having to take a salary cut back to what he started at and was given a short lease to improve, and then he lost his job. And so for them, it doesn't matter because somebody's always looking to recycle an old banker and try. It's just like college coaching. We just get, well, that didn't work. We'll try them here for a little while, even though they don't have the right mindset.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit further here then too. Because, let's say a loan officer does do that, right? And they get their hands slapped a little bit. They get these, requirements put on them, and they're being watched very closely. Their customers are trapped, right? It's not like their customers can just go get a new loan officer. So how do you think their customers feel in that type of situation?
Extremely lost, scared. They don't know what it looks like next. They probably relied on their loan officer. If they're in that with that loan officer, they've relied on their loan officer to put together a balance sheet, their cash flow, their P&L, understand their taxes, make up what they need to on their taxes in order to make it work. All of those type of things are starting to become a concern. And, we talk about financial clarity. They didn't have any coming in. There was no incentive to gain any. They've been flying blind, and they thought everything was going pretty well because they kept getting money back from the bank. Just because you're able to get renewed at the bank doesn't mean that you had a good year. It just means that somebody had some incentives to hit, and they were willing to actually make it happen this year. And so that's really important to consider when you're talking about a banking relationship.
If I'm a customer, right, I feel like, a player on a football team that went there because of the head coach gets fired after their freshman year, and now they're stuck there for 3 years. Maybe not in today's world, but 10, 15 years ago where commitment actually mattered. They were stuck there, right, for the next 3 years. And they're like, I just bet and committed the next 3 or 4 years of my life on this person being here. And I trusted this person up to this point, and now they're gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so the thing is that inside of the ag banking industry, and one of the big problems we have you already touched on a few of these things where people are coming in as ag loan officers, and they're not there for the right reasons. And those type of people, to me, are the most dangerous ones, because those are the ones that build this ego the fastest inside of the bank, like they're above everybody else, and that the farmer should just trust them, and that just because you're a loan officer means you automatically know this stuff, and that you know more than your customers and stuff like that. That's the type of stuff that I witnessed there. And again, you're just setting the customer up for failure when you're ultimately being put in that type of position.
Totally agree. And the problem with being in that situation too is if that loan officer leaves, there's a pretty good chance they're going to go tap their ace and say, hey guys, I want you to go in and scrub this file. And what's going to happen is if they are ag centered and they're number centered, it's going to feel like somebody dropped a damn hammer on you.
Yep.
And they're going to come through and say, well, your working capital is this, your debt to asset is this, your cash flow is this, and you're going to be lost in your understanding of how all that stuff comes together. And that's going to be a big problem. It's going to raise a lot of concerns for the bank. It's going to put you in a position for failure. And so having the right banker and having somebody guide you to those situations is so dang important.
And the thing is, though, too, is I think a lot of customers here, right? So just like this type of situation, loan officer's not doing very good. They either get slapped on the hand and get some, handcuffs put on them essentially to lock them down a little bit and have more requirements on them, or they up and leave the institution. And now all of a sudden your numbers are getting exposed. You have a different loan officer that comes in, maybe it's a superior, and they notice that this loan officer was not doing their job the way they should do, which the first thing they're going to do now is start digging into all the credits. And now all of your problems that you thought weren't problems and that you thought you were covered with become massively exposed to the bank. And now you're getting pressed and you're wondering, what the hell? My loan officer was supposed to be covering all this for me, and now I'm finding out they weren't doing the job that they were supposed to be doing.
Well, and we actually had a case of this actually with a producer that we have out in a different part of the U.S. I won't get into the specifics, but we were with one farm credit. They had them on a borrowing base. Really didn't make any sense of why in the world they were on a borrowing base. They were turning in the borrowing base thinking that they were doing it correctly, and they were updating the numbers the way they thought. Well, all of a sudden a new audit committee comes in, audits the loan, and then all of a sudden it changes overnight. They came to us right at the tail end of that, and I was already working towards, hey, we need to get ahead of this before something happens. It happened. They threw them into special assets. Being in the farm credit system, you get to that right to submit a plan, 15 days. So we had to scramble in order to find them a home. But what we were able to do is go in there, scrub those financials, put them back on their feet, and create a path forward. But there wasn't a banker around that was willing to help them. I mean, they were tuck-tailing, running, trying to hide and keep their job. They didn't care. They were pointing fingers at the customer. But the reality was, for me being in banking for as long as I did, I could see the errors and the complete disregard and lack of attention that loan officer had on that credit. And that was a big problem that led largely led to the situation that they're in.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. And this is where we talk about just the separation between loan officer and business owner. From a business owner perspective, that type of situation, I am massively pissed off because my entire livelihood, I was betting on that loan officer. To come to find out, they were full of hot air, they were full of shit, they were leading me down this pathway, serving 100% their own interest, being completely selfish in this and how they looked inside the bank, not actually representing the operation for the way it truly was there. And now I'm having to deal with the aftermath once they leave or exit or get fired.
Right, absolutely. And all your dreams of, hey, I thought I was doing well, I was building this powerhouse of agriculture that I was going to pass on to my kids and graduate them into the operation, all of that gets thrown by the wayside, and now you're just trying to find a way to get operating credit to survive another day. Because immediately what happened is their line of credit got froze. Well, you still have to remit proceeds, so how are you going to keep operating? It's not like you have a movable plant window very much. You only have a certain amount of time to get in, and that was becoming in question. So it ended up raising and elevating the concerns. Luckily, we were able to get them in a situation that's going to be fruitful for the long term, which I was really excited about. Really, truly is the most rewarding part of this job.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk about the transition, right? Because you've moved from, traditional ag loan officer for a lot of years and more than a decade and everything there, now over to a business coach here, or, what we're calling a legacy farmer advisor here within our company. What shifted for you? What were some of the things that you noticed were just like those pivotal moments where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I can't operate and help these customers from this side of things. I'm just curious what your experience was there.
So, what really kind of started putting the pressure points on me, I started out as an analyst. I was only there for a year, got promoted as a loan officer, and I looked at things a certain way as an analyst. And where I started, all the credits were brought through. It was really up to the analyst to prop the deal up, to send it on to committee. So I was really in charge of the narrative is what it came down to. When I shifted into the loan officer standpoint and I started realizing the people that I was working with didn't have the same passions and motivations that I did, honestly, it started going downhill from there. So I'd have to say since the second year of my banking career, I started feeling like I was in the wrong place because I felt like I was dealing with pressures that were unnecessary pressures to the industry. You get these punk kids that are trying to prove themselves as an analyst or, an admin, or just doesn't give a crap, doesn't know the family, doesn't care about the long-term legacy of that particular operation. And you feel like all the time you're fighting the people that's supposed to be on your side. And I got very, very tired of that. I felt like I was the last line of defense to a very tumultuous and bureaucratic situation. And I wanted to move on from that. And I can remember thinking and telling my wife, I didn't know if this was the right place for me. Now I moved into farm credit. I will say that the situation with farm credit was much better than working within the commercial banks because the charter is just totally different. But even then, I saw the bureaucracy, the pressure, and the amount of stress that it was putting on me, thinking, what am I going to get handed tomorrow that I'm going to have to deliver to my customers that are unnecessary obstacles that could potentially prevent them from being successful from my own institution? And I did not like that.
What have been the differences or changes in the type of customers that you're working with, right? Because if you get handed a new customer inside of the bank there or at Farm Credit, you have to deal with the customer whether or not they want to grow and change or not, right? Which I know you lead from a place of we want to work with people that want to grow, they want to change, they want to evolve, they want to move forward in life and business. Whereas when you get handed bad credits sometimes inside of the bank, you don't have a choice and you're basically dragging those people along there. Talk about, kind of that experience there, but also too, talk about the difference between the type of customers that we're bringing in, coming into Legacy Farmer, that are choosing to be here because they want to grow, they want to learn their numbers at a deep level, they want to make sound business decisions, and they want to have a level of confidence and certainty that they've never had before inside of their operation.
Yeah, it's extremely refreshing, Jace, to have somebody that's willing to invest the time from the producer standpoint. They just are coming. It's like they're thirsty and we're offering the watering hole. Here's the information. We're willing to give it to you. We're willing to invest in you, be as patient as we need to be, and help you grow into the operator that you want to be. And it's not just, Lance has all the answers. The wonderful thing about it is we're assembling a team of what I consider all-stars. I'm very proud of our team. And, we have expertise in different areas. And so we work very hard at developing group synergy in order to invest in these operations. And the way that I look at it every morning is that I'm investing in agriculture, investing in this particular family. Our new purpose really drives home, protecting the legacy of agriculture, one family at a time, because that's how you have to take it. One family at a time. We're moving the needle. We're securing the world food supply, and we're also providing a national security that can be untouchable going forward. So that means a lot to me, but it takes a customer that is willing to invest in themselves, willing to take accountability for what they've gotten themselves into, and willing to move forward, and not looking for excuses of why they are where they are and all this other, my bank, well, we got to move past that and grow. And we get a lot of customers like that.
Yeah, for sure. But like I said, it's just a completely different experience, right? Working with customers versus, from where you're at now and the customers that are coming in because they want to learn and grow and they want to change and evolve versus just getting handed a bad credit inside the bank. You're stuck with them regardless. And now you got to deal how to work with those people. And from a loan officer perspective, I hated that type of scenario. I did not want to work with those people. If they don't want to grow, then why should I invest my time to help them do that on my end?
I agree. And the other part of it is, though, I've had kind of a different scenario in some situations with bad credits. I've had situations where customers were thirsty to learn. They were in a bad situation because they had a horrible loan officer that didn't know what the hell they were doing. And so I've taken over credits and built, 5-10-year plans. And I have a major success story from back in the banking days where we laid out a 10-year plan. I had moved on to a different bank, a different state. And, he came back to me, he said, we did everything that you said we were going to do. And here we are today. We're surviving, we're successful, and we're making money. And to me, that was worth way more than any other kind of accolade that I could have possibly got in that professional setting.
Yeah. So, through this conversation, we've really kind of separated out and talked about the difference between what I would call a really good loan officer like yourself that is able to look at things from a comprehensive view and really, again, keep the customer's interest top of mind for them. And that's the primary purpose that they're there versus a bad loan officer there as well. Now, when it comes to customers and trying to figure out whether or not they have a good loan officer or a bad loan officer, what are some of the red flags or what are some of the positive things that they should be watching for when it comes to deciding who they're going to work with inside the bank?
If they never ask you any questions, that's a bad sign. If they're not willing to show up to your farm and go through your barn and help you understand those financials, that's a problem. If they're not asking you about your future goals, that's a problem because that means that they're very transactional. If the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I can lower your interest rate, turn your back and walk out the door, because that means they're transactional. You're looking for somebody that is willing to get in the dadgum trenches with you. And I want y'all to draw a vision of World War I. We're in the trenches because that is the environment we're in this competitive market. You need somebody that's willing to hand you the ammunition, right? And then when the ammunition's free flowing and the pits are getting charged and everybody is fine with taking that job. But whenever the enemy gets in the trenches with you, they're tuck tail and running, we got a problem, right? Yeah. And so we want to make sure that we have somebody that's willing to go through that battle, understand that every day is a struggle, and that you have people asking questions, not making assumptions about your operation. When we start assuming, we got off the road. One way, they're assuming in order to prop up the credit to get it approved, or they're just assuming to get you out to the door. Either way, it's a bad situation. So when you're looking for a lender, they need to be asking questions, show a true care and deep understanding of your operation. Never lead with interest rate, and talk about what we're going to do in the long term. And that's what I would look for in a lender.
Yeah. So, we can talk about another concept here then too that I'm thinking about while you're bringing this up. In today's economic environment and really interest rate environment, every loan officer and their dog can come up, front and center and say, well, I can lower your interest rate, right? Which for a lot of producers, that being top of mind, that could put them in a situation where they make some careless decisions and maybe move their operating line or move their operation over to a new bank strictly to save 25, 50, maybe 75 basis points, whatever it is there.
Right.
But the thing is that we talk about these two kind of different concepts here. There's financial capital and then there's relationship capital. Right. And in today's economic environment and not just in just today, but I think overall in long term, the customers that are willing to make a decision on who they're working with that weighs more heavily on the value of the relationship capital versus the financial capital, aka the interest rate they're getting on their loans, to me, those customers are going to be a lot more successful long term. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I think that also from a banker standpoint, looking at somebody that's looking for that relationship told me a lot about who I potentially got as a customer. So a good loan officer is also going to be evaluating you like you're evaluating them. If they're a free flowing, open door, we're going to get you in, we're going to promise you these lower rates of better terms and stuff. You're basically shopping at Walmart. Yeah. We don't want to be shopping at Walmart with the legacy that you've been handed by your parents and your grandparents. We want to be investing in the right people and bringing the right partners into your operation. So I think that it's extremely important to understand those dynamics when you're dealing with bankers in particular.
Yeah. And I'm happy that you brought up, shopping at Walmart, because it is a huge problem in the industry where there's two types of people. There's people that buy based on price, and there's people that buy based on value, right? And a legacy farmer, we've always focused heavily on bringing in the customers that are making their decision and their commitment here and their investment here because of the value they receive, not because of price. And I will never compete on price, because when you're competing on price, you're going for the people that are shopping at Walmart, that are, traveling down the road a few little ways to save a penny or a quarter on some items there, because they're more focused on that. Those type of people, long term, that's not a good investment strategy, right? That's not a good way to be looking at how you're representing the future of your business and the legacy that you're trying to build. I'm looking to surround myself with people that think the same way that I do, that are more focused on providing value and understand and live with this core principle of dollars follow value, right? If I'm focused heavily on value, I'm not going to have an issue with money long term.
Totally agree. And, I love that word core, because we talk about core values, right? You need to understand what your core values are, and you need to be looking at developing relationships with partners that share the same core values. And, what I'm looking for whenever we have these meetings with customers, because not everybody gets to be a part or be a member of Legacy Farmer. I want to find people that have the same core values as Legacy Farmer, which is that, one, we're all in, we're willing to adapt and evolve. And those two are the core values that I really push on our customers, because you have to be willing to adapt and evolve in this industry. Guys, this is the most risky particular time in agriculture that we have ever had. And what we're going to see over the next 10 years is we're going to see the numbers of people involved in our industry dwindle. And so if you're going to be one of the ones that are standing, it's going to make you go into a situation where you have to adapt, evolve, change your mindset, learn new things. And so that gets back to, who are you establishing relationships with? You need a banker like that. You need a crop insurance like that. Obviously we feel that way here at Legacy Farmer. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. But when it comes to picking those advisors, though, do you agree with kind of my viewpoint there, where you need to pick advisors that understand and have the capacity to view this financial decision or whatever type of decision you're making from multiple different perspectives inside of your operation, how it's going to impact, whatever the decision is. Maybe it's crop insurance, right? How is this crop insurance plan going to impact your position when it comes to grain marketing or working with your bank, or from an operational and day-to-day, running of the operation standpoint there? What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. And this gets back to, it's hard to pick those relationships. I totally agree with you, but it's hard to pick those relationships if you don't know your numbers.
Yep.
One of the things we do here at Legacy Farmers, we absolutely stress that understanding your numbers, your cash flow, having some kind of set of projections. And then when those opportunities come up, I'm the first to say we're running pro formas. And we're going to see what this is going to do in stretching your total infrastructure of your operation. We have a great operator, was a great operator, that doubled in size in 1 year. And he came to us after doing that. And he's went from doing well, having a nice staff, good free cash flow, to Chapter 12 bankruptcy. What was conceivably a good situation turned into a really bad situation. So I'm sure the banker was really excited, because I know that they took on a bunch of extra debt. They were getting a bunch of fees, a lot of extra interest. But the reality is nobody was saying, hey, God, let's step back. Let's think about the consequences here. Instead, they saw a $2 million price tag and an opportunity to fulfill their goals for the year. And it ended up causing that wreck that they got into. Now, the producer's obviously responsible for that too. But the Other side of that is he didn't have a partner. He didn't have somebody that shared the same core values, and they were looking at their own selfish interests rather than the interests of their producer, which led to the demise of that operation.
Yeah, and the thing is too, is you talk about partners, right? And a lot of banks want to say that they're partners inside of the operation with the customers. Why don't you agree with that?
That's ridiculous. And I will tell you why, because you got to go back to just basic business class, okay? Basic business class says that a company is set up to increase shareholder wealth. And so these banks are for-profit banks, meaning that what they are concerned about is the shareholder well-being, not the customer. You are an asset. That's how they put you on their balance sheet. That asset's supposed to generate money. And when that asset comes under scrutiny from the federal regulators, then you may be on the chopping block. And that is where the bank itself is an investor in your operation. As long as you keep your nose clean, there's a fair chance they're going to keep you on there. I do feel like the loan officers themselves, because I know some of them, can end up being a partner and advocate for you. But what I see about these guys that are good bankers, they never stay at a bank very long. They are nomadic in the industry because they get tired of a certain system. They get a lot of promises made to them by the bank. And then when that starts fading, they're out. So some of the best bankers are always on the move.
Yeah, and the reason is because, with the two banks that I was at, at the end of the day, I tried to find a balance of, protecting the interests of the bank, but also protecting the interests of the customer there as well. And when things got tight or things got a little bit hairy, in type of situation, the bank would always protect only one side of that coin, which was theirs, right? And I couldn't ever live with that because I was factoring through exactly, the financial implications to the bank, but also the massive ones to the customer and how it shifts every part of life. The bank is going to be fine either way, right? And there's different decisions that we could have made there. And when I saw that, hey, yeah, we want to have this tagline that, oh yes, we're partners with your operation, but then we drop people as soon as it gets tough or things go sideways and we don't stick with them through that. Those aren't core values of an institution that just align with me.
Well, and it goes beyond the customer, because I hear that crap all the time that we're partners, but you also hear them preach stuff like, oh, we're a bank family and stuff to the employee.
Yeah.
All of that is garbage when you really get down to the core incentives of the organization itself. We have to be mindful of our numbers and have clarity and make decisions based on our own organizational health and not depend on somebody else to tell us what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, kind of switching gears here and moving on from the banking side of things into your position here as Director of Coaching inside of Legacy Farmer. What are the things that you enjoy the most about what we're doing here and that attracted you to join the company in the first place?
I love the ability to be able to push the needle of agriculture, provide at least a small role in helping protect the world's food supply. We have the most precious resource in all the world. I get very passionate and very emotional about it because 70% of the world's food exports come from the United States of America. The reason we have maintained our superpower status doesn't have to do with the fact that we have the strongest military, all that stuff. Yeah, that helps. But the reason is because people are scared to death that we're not going to sell them anything. And in that, it's going to be a starving population. You're going to have rising costs, mass inflation, all of these type of things. Our farmers are our true frontline heroes. In my role, I get to help design programs and curriculum to help advance the future of agriculture, hire people that share in those common interests, find the right people. I don't give a crap if you're a good banker. You're probably not going to work here. What we're looking for is somebody that wakes up in the morning thinking about, man, Joe Blow down here and this person in Michigan and this person down in Florida and this person in Louisiana and all this other stuff about how in the world can I provide value today in order to make them another dollar that gets them that much closer to passing that farming operation on to their kids. If I can walk away at the end of my career and say that I helped these people pass it on and I helped these people transfer that wealth in a way that was healthy and kept that family farming together, I'm going to feel like I had a very successful go at this whole deal. And I think Legacy Farmer here into what we've built really allows that. And we're just getting started is what's the great problem to have is we're developing curriculum constantly. We're reaching out to resources. We have people that believe into us, and it's just a fun place to be in order to be able to move the needle of agriculture every day.
Yeah, the one thing too that I just I love about what we're doing is when you think about incentives, right? So people talk about advisors in the world, and if you want to know what's important to that advisor, then look at their incentives, right? So looking at your loan officer, what's important to him or her? Interest rates,
Success in operation.
But interest rates or whatever for the bank, maybe it contributes to their bonus at the end of the year, or whatever that is. Seed person, same thing. Agronomy person, same thing. Chemical guy, same thing, right? It's all incentives based. Whereas at Legacy Farmer, we don't have incentives tied to anybody except the producer, right? And making sure that we're using all the education, knowledge, and other families and their lessons and mistakes and stuff that we've, gathered over 6 years here now, and making sure that we're sharing that knowledge to help producers make the best decision. We have zero incentives other than their success. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, our incentives are really structured around making sure we're providing that value. We don't push this checkbox thing. It's not like we're going to run you through a set of curriculum and then boom, here's this, congratulations, you get your bonus. It has to do with when I review a coach's account, I have to be certain that they're getting the value that we expect on every single customer. We're trying to be the standard. And part of that is financial clarity, understanding a balance sheet, understanding cash flow, understanding your bottom line, and then also making that progress towards developing a long-term plan. All of those are customer centric, and it really depends on the customer. It's a two-way street. The incentives are tied to the coach's willingness to be patient and continue investing even when it's hard. So to your point, exactly. I think that this is a very different environment because of that reason.
Yeah, for the first time, I actually feel free to do what's in the best interest of these families and everything that we're helping versus, aligning our decisions and how we lead people based on the incentives of the company that we're for, for the bank, for example. Just never aligned with me.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I just couldn't get behind it. It's like, 1 minute they're all about it. And then another minute they're cutting you off and saying, oh, we're too concentrated in this. I was like, how do I explain that to a producer? They don't even know what a concentration ratio is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so Lance, I'll end it with one final question here. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned working with customers here up to this point, right? And I'm asking you to basically wrap it into 3 max here that the person on the other end of this podcast can listen to and can really learn from those lessons as well. That's going to help drive their decisions inside of their operation to really help them.
Okay. So financial clarity is important. And when we're talking about financial clarity, understanding the basic components of your operation, that's not going to happen overnight. You have to be willing to invest. It's just like anything else in your life. It takes practice. It takes persistence and consistency in order to get the results that you want. And it's important. And if I'm talking about success for the farm in the long term, you have to understand that the market has a ton of volatility and that we need to be prepared for that volatility and understand first and foremost how it translates back to our cost structure and how we keep those costs from getting out of control. We're in a very, very much a trying time. There's a switch going on right now. There's going to be a lot of people out of business. Are you going to be the person that's ready to take on more, or the person that's struggling to survive at the end of this deal? It's really going to come down to understanding those key components: financial clarity, understanding how the volatility of the market is, and then also moving forward with a good, clear plan.
All right, man. Well, thanks a lot for taking time to have this conversation with me today.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.